Hey, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and in this video I'm reviewing the Audi R8 V10 rear-wheel drive. So let's get started. I've had the privilege of driving the first generation of the R8 and a Lamborghini Huracan Evo rear-wheel drive. Beyond just comparing this car with those cars, there's a common perception of the current generation of the R8 being an inadequate sports car in today's market. Is that really true? We're going to find out in this review of the Audi R8 V10 rear-wheel drive. Alright, so let's start off the review by giving a big thank you to Porsche of downtown LA for giving me access to review this Audi R8 V10 rear-wheel drive today. If you're interested in any Porsche new or pre-owned vehicle or any other brand pre-owned vehicle, please give them a call. They've got a really nice selection to choose from. Now, let's get started with the review on the R8 with the exterior design. And when you see this thing in person, there's absolutely no questioning that it is something special. There's nothing inadequate or underwhelming about the exterior design of the R8. Starting from the front with the single frame grille, the highlight blade from the side profile, or the dual oval exhaust tips. And I don't care what anybody says, this thing looks like an exotic car through and through, no questions asked. And even if you were to go with the rear-wheel drive and save some money, they practically look the same as the all-wheel drive variant, sans some mildly distinguishable wheels and some extra carbon fiber, which you can option in to the rear-wheel drive. Alright, so now I made it to the rear end, and before I start talking about the engine, one really cool looking design element is the fact that you can see the exhaust tubing from this single frame mesh grille in the back of the car. Now, the engine cover is actually really cool as well in the way that it opens. It's soft opening. I'd never seen this in an exotic sports car before. There's a button behind the driver's seat. You push that and this thing kind of glides open as it exposes your V10 engine in the Audi R8. So, speaking of that V10, it is a 5.2 liter naturally aspirated 10-cylinder making 532 horsepower and 398 pounds-feet of torque with a 8,700 RPM redline. It's mated to a 7-speed double-clutch transmission, and it's putting power down to the rear wheels. Now, as a friendly reminder, this is the same engine that you would get in the all-wheel drive version of the Audi R8, and one update that Audi has given to it for the 2022 model year is a bump in horsepower. So the rear-wheel drive version now gets 562 horsepower with 409 pounds-feet of torque. So it's a 30 horsepower increase, just in case you thought that this car was slow, which it absolutely is not. Now, one other thing as far as the weight reduction, because this is a rear-wheel drive car, you lose all of the front-end componentry of the all-wheel drive system. Hence, this thing weighs 110 pounds less than the all-wheel drive counterpart. And what does all of this equate to? A 0 to 60 time of 3.6 seconds and a top speed of 201 miles per hour. Now, top speed isn't really talked about much nowadays, but 200 miles per hour is a pretty remarkable achievement for this R8. Now, another thing that is remarkable about it is the way it sounds. So let me fire this thing up so you can take a listen. All right, so let's continue on the mechanical componentry and talk about the wheels, tires, brakes, and suspension. Starting off with the suspension, and this has a mechanical locking rear differential, and it rides on a fixed suspension, so you don't have the ability to make the ride firmer or harsher based off of your driving conditions. But if this was important to you, you have to upgrade to the all-wheel drive model, which nets you the adaptive shocks and a electronic locking differential. Now, let's talk about these wheels. So these are absolutely gorgeous looking wheels. They're 20 inches on all four corners. They're by 8.5 width up front and 11 in the rear. The tires that wrap them, they're Michelin Pilot 4S tires, 245s up front, 305 in the rear. And then jumping inside the wheelbarrow, you have the infamous waffle cone looking rotors from Audi. They're 14.4 inches up front, being bitten onto by a 8-piston brake caliper. On the rear, 14 inches being bitten onto by a 4-piston brake caliper. So now that we've talked about the mechanical componentry of the Audi R8, let me switch gears a little bit to practicality and talk about the frunk and then move on to the interior. All right, so the frunk, and there are multiple ways of opening this thing. There's a button on the interior, and then there's also a button on the key. But once you open this thing, you're greeted with a generous amount of space considering a mid-engine platform exotic car. So to be exact, there are 4 cubic feet of space in the frunk area for the R8. I could easily see you putting in a medium-size traveling luggage piece with you. Something on the larger end, probably going to be a squeeze and not make it in here. But if the front area or the frunk wasn't enough for you, you have an additional 9 cubic feet of space behind the seats. Now, this is one of the selling points for the R8, and I certainly understand why now, is because you've got 13 cubic feet of space, and for an exotic sports car like this, that's a pretty substantial amount of room to put your stuff. So now that that's out of the way, let me jump onto the interior and talk to you about what it's like in there. All right, so now the interior of the Audi R8, and to start off with, this car has the upgraded leather and the premium package, which nets you basically leather all over the place, diamond quilting on the top in Alcantara, and on the seats, this one specifically has it in blue stitching. I believe you can also get it in red, but there's no question about the quality of this interior. The leather, the fit and the finish, the soft touch materials that you kind of have everywhere. It's a really top-notch and high quality interior. Now, one other thing or high-level characteristic of this interior, it is one of the most simple and decluttered interiors I've seen in any car, period. And it only has one screen in it. And in a day and age when we've got 3 screens in the Mercedes EQS and the Porsche Taycan, having one screen is a testament to that simplicity on the interior. So speaking of the screen, it's a 12.3-inch screen out in front of you, and it doubles as a gauge cluster and a infotainment screen. So all of your gauges, your tachometer, your speedometer, your trip, all these things that you're used to out in front of you are there. But in addition to that, your infotainment system is also right here in front of you. Now, what do I think of this? I mean, it's good and it's bad. It's good because if you're the type of person who likes a simple interior, it's fantastic. But for me, I actually would have preferred if this had a separate screen to handle some of the infotainment features. Now, one example of it, I kind of was moving this thing around, and when you have the backup camera enabled, it turns on in the center gauge cluster here. And when I'm moving the wheel and my arms are getting in the way, I have an issue seeing that rear view camera, and I would have preferred if it was just right here, therefore I can see it. Obviously I can use my rear view mirror, but still the rear view camera is something that's important. How often do you use it? I found it being impractical in my short time with this car. So now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the other features inside the interior. So the feel, it's a great size interior. I don't feel claustrophobic in here at all. I cannot imagine another passenger in here that would make me feel like it's too cramped in here. Great size, the right size, I would say, for a sports car, and further contributing to that daily driver capability of the Audi R8. Now, as far as the seats go, they're a comfortable seat. They're not like soft and super cushiony. They're a proper aggressive seat that you would expect in a sports car, but they're still reasonable enough that I wouldn't see anybody having any issues sitting in this and driving this car on a daily basis. It does have thigh extensions. It does have side bolstering and thigh bolstering, so you can expand and contract to make it as aggressive or as non-aggressive, or to fit your body size to your liking. But beyond that, the rest of the interior is actually extremely simple. The climate control systems, 3 buttons, actually a very unique design and very unique layout. But you also have this middle section here with 2 USB charging outlets and a auxiliary cable. So let's wrap up the interior with the simplicity topic and the character of simplicity in here. So is it good that it's simple? I think yes and no. It's good because simplicity means that it will look good for a very long period of time. When it's too overly done, too period centric, it looks dated after a certain point. But I think this is such a classical, clean, simple interior that it will look good for a long period of time. Now, the no side of things, and this is purely subjective to me, is that the simplicity almost doesn't match the exterior of this car. I feel like it's missing a lot of flair. I don't know if it's the screen that would add that in or some other design element, but I feel it's a little too simple in here for my liking. I like a little bit of flair. Give me some design element on the interior that kind of matches the exterior gorgeous design of this car. So those are my thoughts, and now that the interior is out of the way, now let's go to the driving portion of the review and see what this thing is like behind the wheel. Alright, so now the driving portion of the R8 review, and as always, that's what the key looks like. It's actually nothing special, nothing that tells me that this is an R8, unless there's something behind the sticker that I can't tell. But anyway, it's not really that special of a key. Now, as far as the visibility goes, out in front of me, it's fantastic. Out the sides and out the back is actually very, very good. Really good for a sports car. It definitely gives you that 911 fishbowl style visibility where you don't have any issues looking outside of the car. It doesn't feel cramped as far as the windows go. Now, the price of the Audi R8 rear wheel drive, I've got the window sticker here. Let me read off it really quickly. Base price $142,700. This does have the R blue paint, $1,000, the premium pack, the diamond stitch, red brake calipers, contrast stitching, gas guzzler tax. Of course, this is a naturally aspirated 10 cylinder. So price all in $160,570. So this car has about $18,000 in options. And because of COVID and limited supplies and whatnot, these things are selling for quite the price. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and turn this thing on and go for a spin. Foot on the brake, start stop button here in red. And the 10 cylinder sounds great when you turn it on. So let's go. Put it in dynamic mode. The baffles open on the exhaust and it sounds a lot more pronounced, the exhaust does. And the overall interior engine noise also sounds much louder as well compared to comfort. The throttle gets a little bit more sensitive and the steering is a little more weighted. So we are in manual shift mode. Actually, it just shifted by itself. Let's put it back in 1. Now we're in manual shift mode. And let's see what this thing's got. Oh my goodness. Woo, yes. Wow. The engine noise is remarkable as it's pounding away behind you. That sound of the 10 cylinder is unbelievable. And on the downshift, oh, the barks and then the backfires, it sounds really good. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I feel this way every time I drive a 10 cylinder car, especially a naturally aspirated one. There is nothing like driving a 10 cylinder and the exhaust note is just crazy. When I drove the Lamborghini Huracan Evo, that's louder than this, but this is equally as engaging to listen to and enhances the experience like it does for the Lambo. So let me get to the feel. So this thing feels very fast. It does feel very much that 3.5 second 0 to 60 time. Is it super amazingly fast where you get scared? No, I think this fits normally. I'll get it more straight. And the brake The brake is very good as well. I like it because it has a lot of bite at the top of the pedal. I really don't have to mash it for it to give me a lot of braking power. But going back to the speed, this is enormously fast. I wouldn't believe anybody who said that this 532 horsepower is not adequate. Even in today's sports car market, this feels properly fast. And when you've got that high red line, the power delivery is so linear and it gives it a different type of driving experience that I personally prefer. I like high revving, naturally aspirated cars. Now, the rest of it, the transmission feels very good, very immediate. I pull on the shifter, it changes gear either on upshifts or on downshifts. And even in the automatic mode, when you're driving slow in the city, it feels really, really nice. Now, switching to the steering, and in dynamic mode, it does get weighted and it is very direct. It gives you decent amount of feedback, but not the greatest, not as good as a Porsche steering rack. It does feel a little numb, like it's lacking something, but overall, it's pretty good. So I put it back in comfort mode and I'll detail out the rest of the car here. Continuing with the suspension. So the suspension is a properly stiff suspension and it feels like a sports car. Don't come in here and expecting some type of cushiony, lofty ride. Even though people say you can drive this on a daily basis, you certainly can, and but it isn't like some sedan-like ride. It's definitely a sports car and it feels that way. But otherwise, this thing is a real hoot to drive. Even when you're in the comfort mode and you give it some gas, it just wakes up, and that 10-cylinder noise, I really can't get enough of it. It's my favorite thing about this car, actually. And then followed by the looks. So what are my overall thoughts of the Audi R8? There's no way anybody can convince me that this car is inadequate as a sports car, no matter how competitive people tell me the sports car market is. This thing looks amazing. It gets looks wherever it goes. It's turning necks as I'm driving around. And then the interior, it needs a little bit of flair, at least in my opinion. It's too simple, but for some people, that is something that they covet. And then you've got a naturally aspirated engine behind you. Forget about the fact that it's a 10-cylinder howling behind you, 0 to 60 in 3.5, 3.6 seconds. Those calling this inadequate now are going to be begging for this experience 10 years from now. Well, the closest sniff you'll get of an internal combustion engine is going to be in the ultra exotic market, where the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris in the $500,000-$600,000 range have ICE engines, internal combustion engines. But again, those will also be hybrid powered, battery powered. So sports cars in this range will all be electric cars. And then you'll be asking yourself, man, that 10-cylinder Audi, that naturally aspirated R8, that was a car, that was a special car, and this truly is a special car, and this is a dying breed. The naturally aspirated 10-cylinder is just going away. So definitely not inadequate. This is such an unbelievable car. I actually like it a lot. Now, that's all I've got to say. So if you've got any other questions, please leave me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram @DriveSteady. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.